So hi everyone, my name is Rupert Truman, and I'm actually a newly moved CSE, a consulting sales engineer. So this has actually been quite a beneficial experience for me because it has been a little bit of introspection and wondering what is it that we're actually doing. So I've learned things from this process as well, but it's not going to be too technical in the same way that you would have had from Tony or Greg earlier on this week. This is very much just about giving you a feel for a slightly different role and how that all fits up internally at Splunk. And also giving you a bit of background on me and my journey, because probably slightly more relatable to those of you at the start of your career, because I did start my career at Splunk and I'm starting my career at Splunk. So a bit of background on that. As I mentioned to Ben a moment or two ago as well, I don't expect this will take up all the time unless I really start waffling. So it's hopefully a bit of time to ask any questions you have on this or anything else towards the end. I know it's a bit tough when we get around to Friday to continue to listen, so I'll swiftly move on. So I'm going to start off with a slide that you may have seen from other people, but I just thought it'd be quite interesting to show to you guys, because it's something we do internally at Splunk called Million Data Points. So obviously we're a company that is focused entirely on data and all the different ways you use it. So one of the ways in which we sort of make sure that people all over the world and the people that we cooperate with, sometimes just through Slack that we've never met before, get to know each other a little bit better, is by sharing one or two things with us. So I'm based in London. One of the things that I did with my flatmates over the entire course of the last year and a half lockdown is I've definitively ranked every single Indian restaurant in the whole of North London. Can give you, if you ever are in the area, if you ever need any sort of advice on spice, on quality, on sundries, on X factor, on size, on cost, we've got a very elaborate weighted matrix for that, so I can share that with you via spreadsheet. One of the bits I'm going to talk about in a moment with my journey is that I was an intern initially, and when I was an intern at Splunk, unfortunately, I wasn't able to go to our sales kickoff in Vegas. So the photo you see in the middle there is of a pillow, quite a terrifying pillow of my face, which was taken out as a sort of mascot by all the team, and they got a load of photos of my pillow meeting various members of the sort of exec staff, enjoying the nightlife of Vegas and whatnot. So that was a nice little sort of taster as to how the sort of Splunk life that we have here and how friendly and innovative people are. And the final bit is that I, in my spare time, I used to play American football, university. These days I play Australian rules football, which, if you've ever seen it, is essentially a slightly more organized fight, is how I would initially describe it. But I've actually come to learn there's a lot of technical skill involved. So that's been good fun. So in terms of my Splunk journey, which is just something I thought might be useful to pad out this presentation, is because it's been a bit of a strange one. Initially, about this time of year, in 2017, no, 2016, it might even have been. Jesus, 5 years ago, wow. So yeah, about this time in 2016, I had just finished I was halfway through my second year of university up in Newcastle University in England, and I was essentially looking for something to do over the summer. So I was looking at a few jobs, gone to the sort of shops in my local village and stuff, and eventually thought, well, I need a bit of money over the summer. I might as well look at something which might actually give me a bit of an idea as to what I want to do after university. So I basically went on LinkedIn jobs, scrolling a lot, found a few interesting things, and one of them that came out of it was sales engineering at Splunk, which I had no idea what it was previously, but I applied for it, had a load of conversations with the team here, loved everything about it, and ended up accepting the internship, even though it was a year and not the sort of 3 months that I was originally looking for. So I ended up doing a whole year. Had a great time on it, ended up basically doing the job by the end. So it was a bit of a no-brainer then, after I went and completed my final university, to come back in August 2019 as an SE in our commercial team, which essentially covers the whole of Europe and is all the business under companies with $1 billion of revenue. So the sort of smaller business, high volume, smaller amounts of data, but you learn a huge amount because you touch a load of different accounts. You meet customers that are trying to solve different problems every single day. And after doing that for just over 2 years, I've just recently transitioned to being a consultant sales engineer, which I will explain what that is in a moment. A few of the things I just wanted to highlight have been particularly interesting that I've managed to get the opportunity to do over that time is the focus of my degree. And I went back to Newcastle University was computer science. And for my dissertation, I decided to use Splunk and the machine learning toolkit to try and identify political propaganda bots on social media. So the basic idea behind it was, if you have, and Twitter do provide, a labeled data set of bots who have been producing political propaganda or misinformation on social media, and a load of regular users who are talking about political topics on Twitter, if you point this at an algorithm and point the first half as being bots and the first half not being bots, hopefully it can deduce some interesting observations about the factors that contribute to bots, and you can maybe even detect them in real time. Which was an interesting dissertation to do, and it actually meant that when I came back to Splunk, I contributed what I'd done to a ebook we released on the sort of use cases to tomorrow, of tomorrow rather. So it was a fun experience. It turned out that one of the main factors that you can use to work out whether or not an account is real or not, primarily is just age. So if it is an account which is, within the last week or last month or the last 3 months, it's more likely to be a bot than a account that goes back over many years, which makes sense. But it's sort of contrary to thinking at the moment that adversaries are going one step further and just stockpiling accounts for long periods of time before making them active. So it sort of goes against the grain on that. So it's interesting research. Another bit that we were able to do is right in the midst of well, I guess we're still in it, aren't we? The coronavirus global crisis in April 2020. I was part of a team of Splunkers along with Ben, who were over the course of a weekend, we entered the EU versus virus hackathon. And as part of that, we developed 2 Splunk apps to help remediate some of the impacts of coronavirus. So one of them was a educational insights app. So using, again, machine learning and dashboarding to view student activity within a university. So are they still attempting assignments? Are they still coming to lectures, with the goal that you could predict if someone was having real issues and needs to be sort of reached out to make sure that they're still handling the course, and hopefully lowering rate of dropout, increasing rate of retention. So that was a fun one. The other one was focused around using ledger technology to essentially monitor supply chains of key things like vans as they're traveling around Europe. That was quite an interesting one. And the final piece was the blog post I wrote in here, actually, I think, on how to win at fantasy football with Splunk machine learning. So I was a bit frustrated after my first year of competing in our work fantasy football league. I think I finished 10th, and I was like, nah, this needs to improve. So I brought in a load of data on previous years' performance of certain players, and wrote 2 blog posts, which you can find really easily on Google, about how you can use the machine learning toolkit to predict future player performance. It didn't work as such. It worked initially, but it was a good case study for machine learning in the sense that because I didn't update the data and it wasn't fully operationalized, the further you got away from that initial model, the further we went throughout the season, the worse the predictions got. So I've abandoned that approach this year, and I'm currently 2nd in the work league, so everything works out. So before we get into what a CSE is and how they deviate from a regular SE, it's probably useful to have a bit of a background as to the landscape which has required this. So if you think of Splunk, probably what you've seen the most over this week is Splunk Enterprise, which is the core product. that we sell. It's log aggregation software. Initially, this was just for IT systems, so helping out admins to take data from all of their different servers, and without having to go on and control F on their logs and see this in one area. So a really simple use case we're going to understand. Around 2011, so I've taken a snapshot of what it looked like back then. There was a burgeoning SIEM market, so it's which is security incident event management, which is the core of most sort of cybersecurity operations centers. But that's still somewhat in its infancy. So what we were really focused around is this core product, entirely on premise, not in the cloud yet, minimal library of additional components. And we were focused on rapidly pushing this single solution into as many different places as possible. To give you an idea, at that point, we had under 700 employees globally. So a fairly, one piece of software, selling this into different customers, just focusing on increasing adoption and getting the word of Splunk to as many places as possible. Today, that's very different in terms of what we do at Splunk. So you may have seen the various different products that we currently sell as part of the broader data to everything platform at Splunk. If we look at just that security lens, which I briefly mentioned earlier in terms of the market for SIEM, today that looks like an overlay platform called Mission Control, which integrates with lots of different security components that we have within this now security cloud. The base Splunk platform, something called threat intelligence management, to bring in intelligence, intel, feeds, any sort of context enrichment to security events in Splunk, and the security analytics side, which is enterprise security, which is our SIEM solution, and in the area of machine learning for abnormal behavior detection, two different things called UBA, which is the product we sell today, and BA, behavioral analytics, which is going to be the sort of route forward for that area in the cloud going forward. Just in the security side, if you think about that, we've got a huge number of products, all of which have very intricate deployments, all of which have very varied feature sets that are changing all the time. So that's a lot to bear in mind. Then if we go to observability, what you can see there is essentially 7 different products. So ITSI, which is IT service intelligence, that's the sort of business level view of how your services that you provide to either internal customers or externally are performing, and then drilling down to logs. Synthetic monitoring, which is probably the easiest way to describe that, is if you are running a website, it is simulating user runs through your website to view where are the places that it's taking long to load web pages or that they're having errors, so that when real users come through, they're not experiencing those issues, which is where real user monitoring comes at on the flip side there at the bottom, which is essentially that process of actually monitoring these user paths for issues. Infrastructure monitoring, which is essentially servers and serverless functions in the cloud, monitoring their health from dashboards and drilling down to it. APM, application performance monitoring, so monitoring the application level, somewhat similarly to ITSI, but in these large microservice-based applications in the cloud. Log Observer, which is similar to Splunk Core, but focused entirely around logs for those applications. So it's an easy drill down from application performance monitoring. And On-Call, finally, which is essentially a app where IT and ops personnel can get alerts sent to them, take ownership of them, trigger SLAs from wherever they are. So that's a huge number of products, right? Huge number of products we've got here. Some of them are in the cloud. Some of them are on premise, some of them are on both, but with different feature sets. And whenever we sell any one of these products, we are talking to people who are experts in that field, in that specific area. So when we go and work with APM, we are talking to developers who know exactly the intricacies of their application inside and out. When we go and talk about SOAR Cloud, so automation, we are talking to security engineers who are developing specific playbooks for their solutions that they're solving. So if you're probably seeing where I'm going with this, it's not something where it's feasible for one person to have that entire breadth of knowledge anymore. And crucially as well as having all these knowledge, we're now at a point where instead of that sort of land piece of acquiring as many customers as possible that we were talking about in 2011, we're deeply embedded in a lot of customers now. And a lot of it is being that trusted advisor who manages that relationship, identifies what they need from a business point of view, how we can align to it, and point them in the right direction with all this stuff. So the change in requirement has necessitated a change in function from the sales engineering team, and that is where the consulting sales engineers come in. So we are, that's a photo of all of us recently. We went axe throwing on the right-hand side of the screen. We are essentially specialist sales engineers aligned either to that security piece, the observability piece, or IT. But IT and observability probably next year are going to merge into one sort of vector, so vertical rather. So security or observability. So owning one of those two pieces, getting really deep with the technology. You're not account or customer aligned. So instead of having customers which you work entirely with, we are brought in by those customer-based sales engineers to provide technical expertise on one or a couple of those specific products that you have there. The mission is to engage on largest and most complicated technical deals, impress the customer with our knowledge and crucially our product portfolio. That's the most important thing, and upskill the sales engineer who we're working with so they can deliver more of that. So the whole point is that you're pushing the boundaries of what we know about these products in Splunk today. You're learning new things often. You're digging out information in Slack, and you're digging out information in all these places we have it. Sometimes you're learning things, and indirectly then also you're slowly pushing a lot of this onto the sales engineer to build up as well. So it's scaling out knowledge in the region. This is a good little chart we have internally, which basically shows an idea of the plan as to how this sits with different SEs and where they're sort of spent. So the first one to get out of the way is commercial or smaller field segment. You've got to be a bit of an all-rounder, so you've got to do a little bit of everything. And that's what I did for 2 years. It was really useful because it means that you learn a huge amount. You're doing different stuff every day. Some of it is very almost sales focused in terms of managing that account, and some of it is deep technical stuff. In strategic SEs, so these are the people who are managing our largest accounts, sometimes on a 1-to-1 or 1-to-2 level. So they spend a huge amount of time in one customer who might have Splunk in lots of different use cases. They might have a massive IT deployment. They might have a massive security deployment. They might have a massive business intelligence team who's using it as well. And all of these groups could not communicate with one another, which it sounds kind of ludicrous to say, but it is something that we've seen a lot when we go into these customers. So a lot of their time, therefore, is spent managing that relationship, organizing the right workshops and the right enablement and the right paths to success for that customer, identifying and planning how to increase adoption, and then also going through those first layers of technical work. So performing the short demo or the short workshop that gets the customer interested about a particular solution or a particular idea before the CSEs come in and build upon that with specific technical work. Maybe it's a POC, so a proof of concept, where we actually take some of their data, put it in a platform and show what it would look like in a productionized sense. Maybe it's delivering a roadmap presentation where we talk through where our product's going to go in the next year or two. So it's essentially spending less of the time, being a CSE, spending less of the time going through and working and being that trusted advisor specifically to a customer over a year's time or 2 years' time, and actually touching many different customers by being that sort of technical resource where things get beyond either the time or the capabilities of the strategic SE. That's where the CSE comes in. So a great example of this is the other day had a machine learning based presentation for a bank where we were talking about insider threat. The SE who I was working with was saying, look, if I was going to give this presentation, I'd have to take 2-3 days out probably to prepare for it, and there'd still be questions which you can answer, which I wouldn't be able to. So it makes more sense to split that time, which is something I'll get to in a moment, where we spend a lot of our time having that base level of knowledge, which means that when it requires that particular work, we can more quickly and more effectively come in and give that deep presentation. This is kind of an interesting slide, which my manager made, but I think it does articulate that concept well. Is that we're about expanding what we know in the region as a field organization. So like I said earlier, working with product to find features and elements of the latest products that we can use to solve certain problems, building out new resources for different approaches of using Splunk in our products. And then as we push out and learn the new and into the areas where we don't have any knowledge currently in the region, the idea is that we bring the SEs with us. So as we spend a lot of time developing enablement internally, delivering sessions where we upskill everyone around us, and obviously in the sessions that we have directly with customers, doing that as well. And just to expand upon that, this is how the sort of time gets spent in terms of a typical week. So you can see we do still spend a huge amount of time directly with customers, about 60% there. But where this differs to a sales engineer is that you see, firstly, this segment up here, which you might not be able to see depending on how good the colors are on your monitor, is global reach. So that is reaching out to people all over in the company, developing working groups on particular products, building out either white paper dossiers to release to customers, or presentations, or blog posts, or Splunk apps, which can have a more widespread impact. All the things that, if you are a sales engineer aligned to customers, you could absolutely still do, but you could have less time to go that deep and build out these solutions. Also enablement, that's something which, regardless of whether or not you're a CSE or a regular SC, you still get a lot of time to do that, and personal development, but a larger segment, I would argue, than a typical sales engineer from experience, in terms of making sure that when the time comes, you need to be able to answer this very deep technical question. You've already got that knowledge. I found that when I was working as a sales engineer, it was a lot more sort of reactive in terms of what, so for example, a customer would ask me a question, I'd go away and find the answer. As a CSE, you need to sort of anticipate where there are knowledge gaps in the team and the wider region, and fill those in the time that you have when you're not with customers. So just one slide on why I'm really excited about doing this role, and why I think it's really cool. It is an opportunity to go deeper with the product. So on the left-hand side here, we've got a little GIF from Blade Runner, where he's basically just saying "enhance" a lot at the screen. And that's sort of how I equate to what you do as a CSE. Is you get to, instead of knowing every product and everything that we do at a very sort of deep and wide level, you get to go through right to every single component of that, experiment with custom implementations of things, know it inside and out, and be able to answer any question that comes your way when you're in that meeting with a customer. As a result, because we need to go deeper, there is a greater time to learn and develop knowledge. So there is time afforded to going through to actually getting external knowledge in. So I work with several people who are doing on the side degrees, master's degrees or PhDs in things like cybersecurity. So they have that external knowledge of how architecture of these sites go. There is also time internally to get qualification to build out your understanding of things. A lot of time, actually, weirdly, is spent going through Slack channels and digging through and reaching out to people all over the company and learning different things about our products. There's a greater focus on collaboration. So while you do, we like to say, whenever you're working with a customer, there is this village mentality at Splunk, and that it takes a village to raise a child, or it takes a village to close an opportunity. Being a CSE, you spend a huge amount of your time on group Zoom calls with a customer, because whenever you're engaged, you are being engaged by another sales engineer, another technical person who knows the problem as well, and it's thrashing out that problem together, working out the different ways you could attack it. And I personally really love working that way, as opposed to sort of just being a bit of a lone wolf. And finally, there is an encouragement to build and create. So if you remember that Ripple slide where we pushed out, there is that encouragement and that mandate to go into the unknown to some extent, and bring people with you. So build out enablement materials, build out even apps and add-ons on our products. And that really stimulates my creative juices. So I think there's a lot of cool things there. I have actually taken longer than I thought, but I'm more happy to stick around for any questions. Apologies about getting into everyone's time of your day, but hopefully that was helpful. So thank you for joining. And yeah, if you have any questions on either my experiences at Splunk or being a CSE, please fire away, and I'll try my best to answer them.